I've had fair skin all my life, but I used to hide it because I didn't know how to work with it. From the ages of literally 11 to 30, yes, 19 years, I self-tanned religiously because I didn't know how to best complement my fair skin. About 8 months ago, I gave up self-tanner for good, and today I'm going to share with you all of the tips, tricks, and hacks that I have learned in the past 8 months to make my fair skin look even better than it does when I self-tan it. And I'm going to share them all with you in this video. Whether you're trying to give up self-tanner yourself or you've always embraced your fair skin, there is a tip in here for you. Before we dive in, if your beauty routine is your favorite ritual, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I'm here sharing my beauty habits with you. Let's talk fair skin tips. So we're going to start from the base of the makeup, and one of the biggest considerations with very fair skin is going to be making sure that we keep life in the face and we keep some dimension in the face. Now, we want to start that from the very beginning of the process because it's going to help us. What we do as our base is going to help us keep that life, keep that dimension, because a lot of times when you have very fair skin, you go in with makeup, foundation all over, you can end up looking very flat, very dull, kind of like there's just no dimension or life left in the face. So from the very first step, I like to take that into consideration by using products that are going to give a little bit of glow and a little bit of light reflectiveness to the skin. So I of course start with a moisturizer. I love this one from Renee Rouleau. This is the Glow Enhancing Cream. This does have a nice glow to it and a nice light reflectivity to it. Now when we get to foundation, I'm going to talk a little bit about why going super full coverage on fair skin is kind of, well, not just kind of, it's very difficult. And one of the things that you can do to kind of avoid having to go fuller coverage if you're trying to, hide imperfections, look a little bit more blurred, is you can focus on putting on light reflective products at the beginning of the steps. So obviously this is going to bounce light, and when we bounce light, what we're doing is giving a blurring effect anytime we do that. We don't have to use just opacity like a full coverage to blur or to cover imperfections. We can use light and the bouncing of light to do that. So that's what I like to focus on with my first steps, is getting some light bouncing going so that we're not going to have to use a super full coverage when we get to the foundation step. So this is on, it's looking nice. And now for primer, there's two routes you can go. You can either go with a regular primer and mix in something glowy. I often like to use the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter. This is a really good one. It comes with a doe foot applicator. You can put it straight on. You can mix it in with a primer on the back of your hand. There's also the Armani Fluid Sheer. I like that one a lot. Or the Say Glowy Gel. But lately, my favorite primer has been using the Supergoop Glowscreen. It is a sunscreen and it has the glowiness to it. And again, it's just going to help bounce light and give us a nice light reflective glow so that our skin is not going to need as much coverage when we get to foundation. As always, use, 2 fingers full for your sunscreen. This is going to double as my sunscreen and my primer, which I really like. I appreciate that because it saves me from having to do 2 full steps. So this is a product I really, really love. Sometimes in the summer, it's a little bit too much for me, but now that we're into fall, it's a really, really perfect base. It looks really super glowy at first, don't worry. Once we put a little bit of foundation on it, it's going to not be as boom, boom, boom. Now, right here after this step, we've touched our face, we put on moisturizer and primer. This is where it gets a little bit sticky sometimes for very fair-skinned people because there is a good amount of redness on my skin right now from where I have rubbed it and rubbed that product in. I know that's going to dissipate. So what I like to do is give myself a couple minutes to let that dissipate. If I'm in a hurry, I'll use something like these Fresh Air ice globes just to calm my skin down a little bit. These are really, really good with getting rid of the redness and calming the skin a little bit. So if I'm in a hurry, I might use these just to try to get that redness to go down a little bit quicker. If I can avoid it, I like to really not go straight in with foundation while my skin still has this redness, because then I find that I might go a little more heavy-handed with the foundation than I actually need to. My skin, as you saw before I put anything on, it does have a little bit of redness, but it's not much. Now, if you do have quite a bit of redness to the point that you can still see it when you use a medium coverage foundation, then I would try to use a color correcting primer. I find those to look much more natural than going in with a color correcting stick after primer. contour. Now, I used to use the Clinique Redness Solutions. I really liked that one. I used that when I was quite a bit younger and I had a little bit more hormonal redness. Most of that has gone away from me now, so I don't need a color corrector usually, but that Clinique one is really good. And I also know that the IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Redness is a really popular one that you could give a try. It's been a couple minutes and now most of the redness has gone down and I really only have redness in the areas that I know just are red. So I'm ready to move on to foundation. Now for foundation with very fair skin, there are two main considerations. We've touched already on coverage and how we want to kind of avoid full coverage if we can, just because we don't want to go super flat. A big part of that is the more coverage you go with, the more life you're taking out. And that means the more pigment you're going to have to put back in to give that dimension back. That means the more bronzer, the more contour. We're going to have to put more product on because we have taken away so much of the color and so much of the life. And that can be really tricky with fair skin because, obviously when you go heavy-handed with color products, that gets into a whole new thing of issues when your skin is this light. So I like to stick to like lighter medium coverage. That's what I prefer. And the other big point on foundation, the other main consideration is going to be undertone. Undertone, I think, is such a huge thing when we're matching foundations. This is my best foundation color match, period. This is the Synchro Skin Radiant Lifting Foundation from Shiseido. And this is the shade 110 Alabaster, which is described as very fair with balanced tones. One mistake that can be made, and I used to do this myself, is I used to pick the lightest shade in every foundation regardless of tone. And I would often find that foundations would look very salmony on me. Reason being, I definitely am on the cooler side overall, like my color scheme. I am, just a bit to the cool side. I'm not like super duper cool like Snow White with like the rosy complexion, porcelain, and the dark hair. I'm not that cool, but I'm a little bit cool. So I used to think, okay, so I need that lightest shade that's very porcelain and has those rosy tones. But that's not actually the case. My skin really needs a neutral, balanced shade. To me, that's the most important thing. Try to find yourself the right undertone. And there are so many tips and tricks online for this of like, oh, use this test. Do you wear gold or silver jewelry? What do your veins look like? There are so many there, but I have to tell you, in all of those tests, I come up as being cool undertoned. But when I use cool undertone foundations, they just look pink on me, which is, if you can see like the actual undertone shade when you put the foundation on your skin, that's not the right undertone for you. So I have found over the years that I need a neutral undertone, and that matching that undertone is far more important than it being the exact shade of lightness for me. You can always kind of adjust a little bit if you need to with like bronzer, if something is a little bit too dark for you. But what you can't adjust, or what's much harder to adjust, is the undertone. So I'm using a damp sponge because, again, that's going to give me more of that like light medium coverage, just because the sponge is picking up some of the product. So I'm not going in super full coverage. I do sometimes use a brush, to be honest. It depends on the formula of the foundation, but my favorite foundations, like my holy grail foundations, this one, Armani Luminous Silk, even the Guerlain L'Essentiel, which is another amazing match. I wear the shade 00N. So if you're very fair skinned and neutral, that's a really good foundation that has a great shade match. All of those foundations, my very favorites, I find that I like them better with a damp sponge. They're just the best formulas for my skin and happen to also have the best color matches. So this right here is exactly how I like my foundation. This is one of my favorite foundations of all time. The shade match is fantastic. It's just wonderful. Everything looks very good. And there's still life to my face. There's still dimension. I don't look washed out. I don't look like a gray ghost. I don't look like a gargoyle. How many gray things can I think of? I just don't like to look gray. So once you find a good foundation that works with your undertone and you know the right undertone for you, whether that be cool, neutral, or warm, what you can do is make sure that when you're looking at foundations, if you cannot try them on in person, try to look at what the undertones are. If you're buying from Sephora, it will tell you that this shade is, for example, fair with warm undertones or fair with neutral, cool undertones. I can get away with a neutral cool. And I would pay more attention 9 times out of 10 to that undertone undertone, because even if it's not the exact lightest shade, if it matches your undertone, that is 9 times out of 10 gonna be your best bet. And my like best friend for finding foundation matches is actually a website called findation.com. You can go in there, you can put in the foundation shades that you know match you, and then they'll tell you what your best shade match is in another brand. I love that tool. It very rarely lets me down. It is really, really good. Now I put my foundation down to like right about here, and then of course I'm gonna go in with a bronzer. That's another thing to kind of avoid. I always used to think that I had to match my neck. The thing is, our necks are almost always lighter than our face, and if you're very fair already, your neck may be like an impossible shade to match. I know mine certainly is. Like when we get to the dead of winter, my neck is like a piece of paper. There's really not a foundation shade match for that, and I end up washing myself out and looking quite gray because I've tried to match something that is too light for my skin. I'm gonna go in with my concealer now. I don't have a ton of concealer tips that are like, I think very extremely just for fair skin, but I will say that obviously when you have fair skin, a lot of like which concealers are gonna be good for you are gonna come down to which lines have colors that are gonna match you. I personally really only use concealer under my eye and to prime my eyelid. I don't end up spot concealing much. I know a lot of people who are very fair do have to, because obviously if you're going with a lighter medium coverage and then you have blemishes that you want to cover up as well, you would want to spot conceal rather than amp up your full coverage, like your foundation coverage. Go in and spot conceal instead. I personally don't really ever cover blemishes. I have one right here right now. I don't know. I like the life that my skin has. I don't really want to cover too much up, and I think that's just something that's come with age, I guess. I'm just really comfortable with my skin and I like the way it looks, and I want to be able to see it. I also can genuinely tell you, I think that for fair skin, it just looks better to see more of your skin. It looks better, it looks more natural, it has more life to it. And I used to self-tan so much, and honestly, like I love now my very fair skin. There's just something about it that I feel like it just looks so much better on me than trying to change the skin tone I have. So, you know, I just am leaning into it, and I think that's one of the best things you can do if you have very fair skin is just lean into that. You know, take advantage of that. Play to your strengths. Play to the fact that you can look so lovely with pops of color here and there, which we're going to talk about when we get to cheeks, but you can definitely go in and spot conceal, but whatever makes you feel comfortable is what you want to go with. Don't feel like you have to like cover up every bit of redness, because at the end of the day, I think it looks really healthy and really beautiful to have natural flush to the skin. I'm going to go in with brows next. And now for brows, I'm going to tell you the thing that I have most learned about your brows when you have fair skin is try to go with your natural brow color if you at all can. If you can go with your natural brow color, do it. Because again, tone is so important, and your natural brow is gonna have the right tone for your skin. It's gonna match, it's gonna be right. God doesn't make mistakes. I promise your eyebrows are the perfect color. I know not everyone can do that. You know, maybe you have like a special color of hair. Maybe you have your hair like blue or purple or something, and so you dye your eyebrows. Totally your game. But if you have like one of like the found in nature hair colors, like blonde, brown, black, I would stick with your brows how they are, unless you need to darken them. You know, I guess if you have blonde brows naturally and you dye your hair black, okay, go for it. But try to match the natural tone of the brow. For example, mine is like a very dark blonde that is on the cool side, like a dark taupe shade. So I like to find a dark taupe eyebrow pencil. The best shade match I found to date is this one from Dior. This is a good dark taupe color. It doesn't pull warm, which is super important. If you have like this kind of coloring and you put on a warm brow pencil, your brows are gonna look, you know, like when people have like hot roots, when their roots look kind of orange and it's just not a really good look. Yeah, that can happen to your eyebrows too if you end up using like a warm brow pencil when you have a cool toned brow. Obviously, if you have a warm toned brow, you're gonna go with a warm toned eyebrow pencil. But matching that tone is so important. On days where I try like a new eyebrow pencil and I find out like, oh, it's too warm, those are like some of the worst makeup days for me, because it's just like having that tone not be right really throws off the entire look of the makeup. When you're super fair, you just don't have that pigment to the skin to kind of be very forgiving when it comes to the tone. We're wanting to make sure everything meshes when it comes to that. For eyes, I'm going to show you a neutral eye look, because I cannot count how many articles I read about like fair skin makeup that were like, oh, don't do a neutral eye if you have fair skin, go colorful. Yes, you can go colorful, but you can do a neutral eye 100%. And one of the best ways to do that is a super easy way using stuff you already have. So for your base, go in with like your favorite powder. Mine is from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Airbrush Flawless Finish Powder in 1 Fair. Use that as your base. And then for your crease color, use your favorite bronzer. Whatever bronzer looks really good on the rest of your face is gonna look really good on your eye too. And it's gonna keep everything together. This is definitely something I've talked about before, maybe not in the context of being fair skinned, but it's a really good tip for everyone, I think, but especially if you're fair skinned, it's a really great way to get a neutral eye look that is really flattering. So I'm gonna use the Gucci bronzer today. This is the shade 01, and this is what I'm gonna use on my face later. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this as my crease color. And you can give more dimension to this just by layering, adding layers. You can go in and do the crease, go pretty wide, and then you can get a smaller blending brush and go in and add more depth to it. I'm pretty happy with this, but I do just wanna show you what it looks like to get a little bit more depth. Like this is a pencil brush, so I can go in and just go into the crease to get a little more depth there, and then blend it out with that same fluffy brush. It'll soften it up, but then I definitely have a little bit more dimension here than I have over here. Let's talk about liner. There are so many different ways you can do your liner with fair skin. For me personally, I find that using like a black gel liner is too harsh for me. If I want to use a black, like do a black wing, what I will do is go in with an angled liner brush and a black eyeshadow and create a wing that way. I call it an eyeshadow wing. I've done it in so many videos. I find it to be a little bit gentler, a little bit softer for my skin tone, because you can be pretty delicate when you are very fair. So I find that to just not look as harsh. So if I'm gonna do like a black wing, I like to do like a shadow liner. Now, if I want to use like a pencil eyeliner, I like to use shades that are not black. I really love like a good brown, a good warm, rich brown. This one is Blitz Brown from Pat McGrath, a really nice shade. It's quite warm, quite pretty. I also like Charlotte Tilbury. She has so many good shades that aren't black. This is Walk of No Shame. It's a nice berry. This is a fantastic one. She also has the Pillow Talk eyeliner. I love that one as well. It's also berry, but it's a little bit more rosy. And I also really like her smoky gray eyeliner right here. This is such a good gray. It's not too cool where you're gonna look like, you know, like you have like a black eye or something too gray going on. It's got just the perfect balance, I feel like, to have a gray that is not gloomy or ashy on your eye. So I really love all 4 of these. Are fantastic shades for if you have very fair skin. I will link all of them down below along with everything else that I'm using today. Today I think I'm gonna use Blitz Brown, and I'm just gonna smudge this along my upper lash line, and I'm gonna blend it a little bit with this pencil brush just to smoke it a bit. Very smoky, very soft, not too harsh for my fair skin. It's just such a lovely shade, and I just love how smoky that looks with my lashes. My lashes are just newly done. I do have lash extensions. Highly recommend those. My lashes are so fair on their own, so I really need lash extensions to help me out. I've had them for years and years, I think since I was 23, so that's 8 years now that I've been getting lash extensions. Trust me, if you find a really good place to go, they're fantastic. Now, before I had eyelash extensions, I would almost always need to line the upper waterline because I would be able to kind of see a gap right there because I am so fair. Now I don't really have to do that most days unless like I'm due for an eyelash fill, and so things are a little bit sparse and I can see that. But if you don't have eyelash extensions, or even if you do and you find that you have, you know, kind of that visible lightness right there, just go in there and line up there. On my lower lash line, sometimes I like to put something down there, sometimes I don't. The one thing I would recommend if you are going to do your lower lash line is to maybe stick to the outer third. That's often what I do, because if I pull stuff too far into the inner corner, I feel like it almost always looks kind of like I'm tired. You know, you can have blueness down here when you're very fair. And so I just find that keeping this inner third, at least, of my lower lash line free and clear is the best bet for me. Anytime I pull, you'll see me sometimes I will pull all the way across and then I almost always regret it. I'm like, dang it, why did I do that? I don't even like that. And sometimes I'll just leave the lower lash line completely free of product. I might just put some mascara. Sometimes I don't even put mascara. If I'm going for like a super wide eye look, I won't even put anything on the lower lashes at all. You don't have to feel obligated to do things just because, you know, that's like the steps or what people traditionally do. You really have to think about what works best for you, because a big thing to remember is like so many of like the makeup tutorials and makeup tips that we hear are geared towards people who have like medium skin tones or like, you know, light medium to tan. I feel like when you're very dark or you're very fair, a lot of times like those tips just don't really mesh. So, you know, you can just do things differently. You don't have to feel obligated to do makeup a certain way because that's what everybody else does, because at the end of the day, it is your face. Like no one else has to walk around with your face. Just remember that. So I'm gonna put just a touch of this eyeliner on the outer third, and then I'm gonna blend it out with my pencil brush. One thing that I didn't do today, but that you can do and that I often do, is if you're going for a more colorful look or a more smoky look, definitely wait to do your concealer, do your foundation, then do your eyeshadow, because if you're very fair, at least for me, I have the hardest time being able to like actually see how an eye look works with my skin unless I already have my foundation on, because I'll be so distracted by any redness or anything like that. So I like to do the foundation first, and then you can go in and do the under eye concealer to clean everything up. I do that quite a bit, just today I didn't. For lower lashes, I'm gonna show you one of my favorite tricks. I used to do this all the time and then I forgot about it for years. And when I was thinking about this video, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to show them the lower lash mascara trick. This is like my favorite makeup trick probably ever. I don't know, I learned this years and years and years ago, like probably 10 years ago, and I just think it is genius. I can't even remember where I learned it. For my lower lash line, I have just like the tiniest baby lashes, and it's so hard sometimes for me to get like any kind of length on them or to be able to like see the definition of them. So this trick is not only for just like fair skin, but it's also gonna help if you just have like very short baby lashes on the lower lash line. This is gonna help you get more length out of your mascara. So what I like to do is I like to go in with a brown mascara first on the lower lashes. This is the CoverGirl Lash Blast Volume. This is like something that I have used, like I used to use this when I first learned this trick like 10 years ago. So I go in first with that on the lower lashes. You can use any brown mascara. This is just the one that I think is easiest to find, because you can find this like in any Walgreens or CVS. So I go in first with that. I give it a few minutes to dry, and then I'm gonna go over it with a black, but not all the way over it, just kind of like at like, I would say halfway into the tip. What that's gonna do is mean that the closest part to my lash line is gonna still be brown, so it's not gonna be as harsh on my skin, but also the biggest thing this does is give you way more length than just using a black mascara by itself. I don't know why it works, but it does. It's fantastic. Again, I wish I could remember. I think I read about this tip somewhere. I wish I could remember where I learned it. It's such a good hack. Okay, so now with the black, this is just the Lancome Definicils mascara. I'm gonna go do just like the tips, and the length that I get from this, I can't even tell you, is so much more than when I use black by itself, but it looks so much softer because I've got that brown at the root that's closest to my skin. I mean, look how long my freaking lower lashes are. It's amazing. This is a fantastic tip, especially like if you're doing like a doll eye. So you just like don't put anything else on the eyes. You just do like your mascara, or if you're me, you have lash extensions and then your lower lash mascara. This is just gonna make your eyes super big. So now that we're done with the eyes, we need to get some color back into the skin. The best way to do that is obviously gonna be with a bronzer. Now my best tip for bronzer is gonna be to really invest in a good, like cool toned bronzer. Here's the thing, a bronzer bronzer is hardly ever going to be too cool for you if you're fair skinned, because even a bronzer with a little bit of a cool tone to it is still going to have the warmth. By definition, that's its job. I have an entire video on the best bronzers for fair skin. I will link that above and below, but just a couple of the ones from that video that I really love are the Gucci 01. That's the one that I used on my eyes today, and that I'm going to use also on my skin. Also, the Guerlain Terracotta bronzer in Light Cool is a really fantastic bronzer. They just reformulated this, and I love the new formula even better than the old. I always start really lightly because you can always build up with a bronzer. That's not just a fair skin tip, that's like a tip for everybody. And I just do, you know, kind of get along the jawline, and I always pull down, because again, you're so light on the neck. So adding a little bit of warmth there is just going to make everything look a little bit more seamless, a little bit more pulled together. And again, you can see I just love this bronzer. I feel like it's such a good tone if you're very fair. I really like it. I just kind of do like broad sweeping circles up under the cheekbone and a little bit on top of it. If your cheekbones are maybe a little bit lower than mine, you might not want to go on top, but my cheekbones sit up pretty high. I have that natural definition there, so I don't mind going on top. I find it to be just the best way to give some really nice natural warmth to the skin, and this is such a lovely bronzer. Now, if at any point you're noticing that your skin looks a little bit dull, looking a little bit flat, this is something that, especially if you have dry fair skin like I do, you're gonna struggle with a little bit. Go in with a setting spray in between or some kind of mist. I have several I like. I love the Charlotte Tilbury airbrush setting spray. I also really like this one from Cover FX. This is my all-time favorite setting spray. There's the good old MAC Fix Plus that you can use between layers, and also this Watermelon Glow Ultra Fine Mist from Glow Recipe is a really good one. And you can just spray a little bit, and you can do that between steps. You can 100% do that. You don't have to wait until the end to, you know, give a little bit of life back in, especially if you have dry skin. Getting a little bit of moisture into everything can be a really great way to get it to set properly. And again, giving more dimension and glow and life to the skin so that we don't look flat. We don't end up with like one-dimensional moon face. All right, now for blush. I'm gonna share with you a few of my very favorite blushes for my skin tone. Here's Nearly Rose from Rare Beauty. This is such a beautiful formula and a beautiful like ingenue pink. Like once you blend it out, it's just so perfect. It's such a perfect rosy pink shade to put on the cheeks. Another great shade, if you're very fair, is gonna be like an apricot. This is Nearly Apricot from Rare Beauty. I really like her being Selena Gomez. I really like her blushes, and that is a really good one. A shade that's very unique that I never would have thought to get before I owned it is this one from Melt. This is the Cream Blush Light in Polished, which is a grapefruit shade. This is one of the most flattering blush shades that I own. I absolutely adore it. It is just absolutely fantastic. They call it grapefruit, but it's really like if a nice pink met like apricot. It's got both of those tones in it, so it just looks so radiant on the skin. It gives so much life, and it looks quite natural. For something like a good berry, I really like the Color of Passion cream blush from Charlotte Tilbury. You'll notice all of these are cream blushes, especially because we're getting into fall and winter. I really love a cream blush because my skin is dry and because it's fair. So this is gonna give so much life. This is a fantastic berry shade. These were limited edition last year, and then she brought them back and made them permanent. Thank goodness, because they are so beautiful. There's another one called Color of Dreams that is also nice, but for me, Color of Passion is the better shade. And then last but not least, let me just show you this shade. It is top notch, a good poppy shade, like a good bright pink. This is almost fuchsia. This is Pop It from Westman Atelier, and this is such a lovely shade. Like once you blend it out, it's not as harsh as it looks just swatching it. Obviously, no blush is, but it's such a gorgeous shade, and it just gives so much life to the cheeks. I'm gonna go in and put a little bit on my ring finger and get that on there, and then I'm gonna blend it out with my damp sponge. This shade is so beautiful. I love this blush formula, and it just gives such a beautiful natural like blush to the cheek. It is total Nordic cheek, total aspen cheek. It's just amazing. I highly recommend finding like the best blush shape for you. I have a heart-shaped face, and so for me, the most natural flush is to do this one right here. This most closely mimics how I actually flush, and I find that to be the most flattering, not only for my face shape, but I think also for my coloring, because a lot of times when you're very fair, you know, if you pull the blush down too far, it's just super obvious that it's blush, you know? So depending on your face shape, you really want to make sure that you're getting the best blush shape for your face shape, because that's going to help it look more natural, not only on the shape, but also on like your actual skin tone. Because again, being so fair, everywhere that we put color, we want to make sure that it's working for us. And look at that flush. It's just perfection and so natural. This formula is so beautiful, blends out like a dream. And I love that you just need the tiniest bit to get the perfect amount of pigment onto the skin. Westman Atelier is expensive, but I feel like their products are really, really good. I do also kind of blend into my hairline. I would kind of remind you to make sure that everything you're doing on your skin, especially because we're so fair. If you are fair, you might be watching this video and have dark skin and be like, I just really like you, Ashley, in which case, thank you. I really appreciate that. I will say though, if you're very, very fair, make sure that you are blending products into the hairline, or you're gonna end up like, look right here. I didn't blend my bronzer in enough, and I have this little like sliver of just bright white skin that makes it so obvious that I was using makeup right there. So just make sure you really get into that hairline, and down here, make sure you get up behind the ear. Pull everything up behind the ear. Trust me, that's the last thing we want, is that bright white, you know, translucent Casper skin showing through right next to our beautiful bronzer or blush. I do tend to like to get like the tip of my nose a little bit. I try to do it like barely. But again, because I'm naturally fair, you know, I do have some natural redness there, and I want a little bit of that there just so that everything looks more lively. Again, like I said from the beginning of this video, that is such a big consideration, is making sure that we have that life in the face and we're not one-dimensional moon faces. Now, last but not least, we're gonna do lips. My biggest tip for lips when it comes to fair skin is you can go super bright, you can go red, like you just can go all the bright shades you want when you have fair skin, because it just pops against your skin. But again, keep in mind your undertones. I'm not saying you can't do a warm lip if you have cool undertones, or a cool lip if you have warm undertones. You 100% can. It's just going to depend on your personal coloring. But one of my biggest tips is to make sure that you match the tone of your blush to your lips. I wouldn't go with like a very warm blush and then a cool tone lip, because everything is just not going to vibe. Just adjust your blush accordingly. Today, since I used that, you know, bright pop-up pink blush, I want to go with something that's got that same kind of cool shade on the lips. So I'm going to use Beauty from Lisa Eldridge. This is one of her new lip liners. This is a vibrant rose pink shade is what it's described as, and I feel like it's just a really good complement to this shade that we used on the cheek. You can always check them, just see on your hand if they kind of look like they vibe, and then that's what I kind of use to see, because for me, if I don't get the tone, like the undertone close in the cheek and the lip, everything just kind of looks off, and I'll end up wiping off the lip and putting on a different one, which you can do. Mix and match it. I am so not precise with lip liner. If it's a good creamy lip liner, I'll line the outside and then just rub my lips together. So over this, I'm gonna go with a gloss. I'm gonna be using Ma Pousse from Westman Atelier. This is the Squeaky Clean Lip Balm, and this shade I feel like is so perfect with this trio. Again, we've got like a really good tone match. Even if the shades or the tone isn't exactly the same, having that undertone be in the same vein is really helpful. And this, again, I've talked about this Squeaky Clean liquid lip balm before on my channel. It is such a wonderful formula. It's the perfect marriage of a gloss and a lip balm. It's just fantastic, you guys. And I love this. Like, I feel like everything vibes, and this is such a good flattering look. Last but not least, I am gonna use a setting spray. Earlier I used the Glow Recipe in between steps, but I'm gonna finish off with just the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Setting Spray. I really like this. And again, just giving a little bit more life and dimension to the skin, which super important if you're fair, but doubly important if you are fair and dry. And this is the finished look. I love it. I feel so perfectly balanced and lovely. Again, I used to not want to wear my skin as fair as it naturally is. I would self-tan all the time. Like I would never not be self-tanned because I just didn't know how to work with my skin being this fair. I wasn't sure how to do my makeup and I felt like everything looked off because so many little adjustments that you have to make that are super simple, but that maybe you just don't know. So I hope that some of these tips have helped you. Let me know in the comments below. If you have fair skin, what is your best fair skin beauty tip? Let's help each other out. Maybe you know one that I don't. I am always up for hearing about your tips. I hope to see you in my next video. Until then, you take care of yourself. Bye.